Hua Xiangyue was not lacking in crystal stones or anything. She only wanted to vent out her anger. That was why she did not want any share from Xianxia. Little rascal, you're really bad. Fortunately, sister is not your enemy. Otherwise, it would be unfortunate. Right, the auction has a set of rules. You can't bid for your own goods. I, as the highest supervisor of the auction, of course cannot let you break the rules. Hua Xiangyue said. That's simple. Can't we ask Sister Menger? This should not break the rules. Chun Xiang mischievously laughed and said. Hua Xiangyue's eyes lit up as ambiguously smiled and said, Lu Menger must seriously instill you obedience. Chun Xiang stuck out his tongue, then hastily left the Danxiang Tower and returned to the divine weapon shop. There was still more than a month before the auction would begin. If by that time Chun Xiang's preparation wasn't enough, he was worried that he could only look at the good stuff and wouldn't be able to buy them because his true elemental dawn were lacking. For now, he could try to cover up by refining many true elemental dawn. In the Black Tortoise mysterious realm, he had obtained a large number of herbs for the true elemental dawn, and in accordance with 5 dawn per set of herbs, it was enough for him to refine more than 10,000 true elemental dawn. Even considering his quick speed in refining, it would still be difficult for him to completely refine them in this period. In an hour, Chun Xiang could refine 10 times, and using 4 hours every day for alchemy, he could refine 40 times. In other words, he could only refine 200 true elemental dawn every day. He estimated that at the time of the auction, he would probably be able to refine approximately 5,000 dawn. At the moment, he had about 8,000 true elemental dawn in his possession, but even after all of this, he still felt that it was still lacking. Chun Xiang began to tediously refine dawn. In order to not leave any regrets in that large-scale auction, he could only bite the bullet and go into seclusion. His schedule was very tight. In the day he would refine dawn, while in the night he would cultivate true qi, and at the same time he would also congeal the golden dragon saliva. This way, once he returned to the extreme martial sect, he would be able to quickly accelerate the ripening of a large number of his precious spirit herbs. When Lu Menger returned, she saw a note on the table in a hall. It was left behind by Chun Xiang, saying he went to seclusion for alchemy. Moreover, he also asked Lu Menger to look for Hua Xiangyue. Chun Xiang refined dawn with a firm and calm heart. At the time of the auction, although he could borrow some money from Hua Xiangyue and Lu Menger, he still didn't want to. It would appear that he had no backbone, and he would even appear as a laughingstock to them. Time passed away bit by bit. In the fragrant city, a storm was brewing. Outstanding disciples of various sects, some reputed aristocrats, and even devil sect disciples were mixed in the city to participate in the grand meeting. For many martial artists, it was something to rely upon. Many came here in order to take advantage of the grand meeting to buy some relatively cheaper dawn, or came along to join in the fun and open their outlook. Some deans also quietly arrived. Some of them were here to procure dawn, some came as guests of Danxiang Taoyuan, and some even arrived here to especially make their disciples participate in the alchemy tournament. Of course, the majority of them all came here for the auction. These deans not only wanted to buy, but also wanted to sell. That was why in the auction, some very attractive things which were only in the hands of the Nirvana realm martial artists would appear in the auction. It was precisely because of this that Chun Xiang had to toughen his heart to refine more true elemental dawn. He was not like those deans with strong backgrounds. If he didn't have enough capital by the time of the auction, he could only impatiently watch in vain. And, as he expected, before the start of the auction, he was able to refine 5,500 true elemental dawn, and along with the 8,500 dawn, he had a total of 14,000 dawn in his hand. However, even after this, he still felt that it was not enough. Little rascal, it is very rare to see you so honest. You even went into closed-door training for as much as 1 month. Lu Menger, with Hua Xiangyue, sat in the hall while chatting. Once Chun Xiang came out, he immediately caught sight of the two beauties. He didn't expect Hua Xiangyue would actually come here so often. The relationship of these two turned out to be better than he had imagined. Both of them were wearing snow-white simple longuette, but both had 2 different kinds of flavor. One was charming and enthralling, while the other was noble and dignified. None of them was better or worse than the other, making the onlooking Chun Xiang secretly praise in his heart. Looking at you being so impatient, It seems that someone will be out of luck? Hua Xiangyue mischievously laughed and said as she handed a cup of tea to Chen Xiang. Chen Xiang walked over and took the teacup, then very uncouthly sat down on the chair, crossed his legs and said, I'm going to earn true elemental dawn. I'm not an aloof figure like the both of you, whom, without even doing anything, will still have a large amount of crystal stones and true elemental dawn. Then you'll have to work hard. This is definitely your first time participating in such a large auction. Your shitty capital is probably only enough to take a look at the fun. When those deans and elder-level characters come out to bid, your legs will definitely become soft. Hua Xiangyue said in a laughing tone. Lu Menjie chuckled and said, Little rascal, what if sister lends you a bit? Hua Xiangyue also followed in. I can also lend you some. Chen Xiang secretly despised them, but he did not immediately refuse. For the time being, there is no need. Wait for the auction to begin. At that time, if I really need more, then we can talk again. If it was truly not enough, Chen Xiang could only nonchalantly ask them. Of course he was not afraid of these two threatening him every day. One must know the lender was always the master. I want to auction two things. It is best if you can auction them at the beginning. Chen Xiang replied he had many good stuffs, but some of them were things he could not bear to sell. This point, both Hua Xiangyue and Lu Menjie knew. Hua Xiangyue asked, What is it? If you want to sell Dawn, I advise you to forget it. If you Jiangling wasn't impatient, your elemental spirit Dan is not worth anything. 10 million crystal stones for these tycoons was indeed not worth anything. I want to sell 10 building foundation Dawn, sell them all together. This should be able to fetch a very high price. And a fire martial soul. Chen Xiang said. Hearing the three words, fire martial soul, Hua Xiangyue and Lu Menjie were both extremely surprised. The fire martial soul was different from the fire spirit. The fire martial soul could only be fused with a single part of one's body, such as the arm or the leg. As for the fire spirit, it would fuse with the whole body and as well as the soul, and it could even allow one to have powerful flames. When a fire martial soul was fused with the meridians of the arm, no matter what type of true qi, its user would be able to release flames. The strength of the flames vary from one user to another. If their true qi was vigorous, then their flames would be stronger. Chen Xiang had acquired this fire martial soul when he had killed the crown prince Song Nanming. Although it wasn't as good as a fire spirit, if it was sold in an auction, a lot of people would want to fight for it. You really have this thing? Lu Menjie came next to Chen Xiang. Chen Xiang took out a small jade bottle and handed it to Lu Menjie. Lu Menjie, after observing the jade bottle for a bit, said in surprise, You little rascal, how can you have so many precious things? It is the first time for me to see a fire martial soul. Hua Xiangyue also took a closer look. In the small jade bottle, there was a round red thing releasing a warm current. It was indeed the fire martial soul. Although it was the first time Hua Xiangyue and Lu Menjie had seen it, they could still recognize it from the information provided in the records. How is it? Chen Xiang proudly laughed and said, Indeed, it is the fire martial soul. But where did you get it? Hua Xiangyue covered the jade bottle and received it along with the 10 building foundation Dawn. Although it was a very rare thing, but for them it was of little value. Selling it wasn't particularly hard for them. Lu Menjie was also very curious, but Chen Xiang laughed and said, Not going to tell you. Humph. Chen Xiang returned to his room. Now, he knew that these deans were all richer than he had imagined. Last time, when he had sold the building foundation Dawn to Gu Dongchen, he gave him a very honest price, yet Gu Dongchen actually still bargained with him, not to mention that he even pretended to be very poor. He decided to definitely extort his rich martial nephews. Chen Xiang was rather wealthy, but neither Hua Xiangyue nor Lu Menjie were clear about the exact amount of Chen Xiang's wealth. However, they believed that it would be very difficult for Chen Xiang to buy precious spirit herbs in this large-scale auction, because even they themselves were rather doubtful with regards to whether they could grab some good stuff or not. Soon, the auction began. It was held on the 13th and 14th floor of the huge Danxiang Tower. Both the floor were fused together to make a bigger one, but the place itself was not too big. It was just enough for 5,000 to 6,000 people. But then again, those who could attend the auction were not some ordinary characters. This large-scale auction only invited people with a certain position and wealth in the Qinwu mainland. If anyone else wanted to participate in the auction, then they would have to pay a rather huge sum as an attendance fee. If one wanted their own items to be auctioned, they could also enter. At this moment, the auction house was very quiet. Everyone here were extremely courteous, and once they entered here, none of them made any loud noise. They just calmly sat on their own seat. In this place, there were some boxed rooms, and only the most respectful group of people in the Qinwu mainland had the qualification to enter inside. That was why the whole auction field was shrouded in a rather serious atmosphere. These deans, even if they had converged their breath, they would still release some spiritual pressure from time to time, making those with not enough strength feel very uncomfortable. Xianxia and Lu Menjie, alongside Xianxia, were inside a boxed room. Xianxia had covered his face and converged his breath. From time to time, someone's divine sense would swept over them, which made both Lu Menjie and Xianxia to feel unhappy. "Sister Hua, has my dean arrived?" Xianxia asked. Except for the dean of the beast martial sect, the tycoons of the 8 major righteous sects had arrived. Patriarchs of many famous families have also arrived. Xianxia said. She was responsible for this auction. No one beside her was clearer about the situation. As Xianxia looked at the bunch of people sitting in the auction field, he actually found Yun Xiaodao, Zhu Rong, and also Shui Weilong. All of them had come along with their family's patriarch. "Little rascal, do not use your own voice and expose your identity. Those guys all know I and Xianxia are together. If they find you with us, it would make them suspicious," Lu Menjie said. Xianxia clearly understood this. Now, there was a big improvement regarding his convergence of breath. Su Meiyao and Bai Yuyu reflected upon this very issue for him. It was mainly done by relying on Long Shui, and at this point in time, Xianxia's skill at concealing himself had even left Lu Menjie and Xianxia surprised. Unlike before, they could only vaguely sense the situation inside Xianxia's body. The auction began. It was hosted by Mrs. Li. First, she courteously welcomed everyone. Only then was the first item taken out for auction. The first item turned out to be Xianxia's Building Foundation Dawn. 10 Building Foundation Dawn. In this auction, it is actually the first time for so many to appear. Everybody should be aware of the Building Foundation Dawn. I too am not going to be long-winded. The starting price is 2 million crystal stones. "Let the bidding begin," Mrs. Li said. 2 million crystal stones. In Xianxia's eyes, this amount was a rather small number. However, this was only the starting price. It would certainly slowly increase. Not to mention that the Building Foundation Dawn were rare and expensive in the Qinwu mainland. If someone was really in need, even some low-grade profound level Dan could be auctioned for a very high price. During the auction, crystal stones were usually used to bid, but during the payment, the buyers could choose to use crystal stones or true elemental Dan. Generally speaking, majority would use true elemental Dan. 2.2 million crystal stones. A familiar shout entered Xianxia's ears. This was Gu Dongchen's voice. Xianxia didn't expect that his eldest martial nephew was so lacking in Building Foundation Dawn. In his heart, he was secretly happy. After returning, he would immediately accelerate the ripening of the Azure Profound Fruit, and by then, he would definitely be able to refine numerous Building Foundation Dawn. He was not afraid of swindling this stingy eldest martial nephew to death. This guy only added 20,000 crystal stones at once. He's really stingy. Last time, he seeked me to refine a flying disc, and he even bargained with me for half a day. Lu Menjie's voice was filled with contempt. Xianxia was secretly having a good laugh. He didn't expect that his eldest martial nephew was such a stingy guy. The Building Foundation Dawn were not only sought out by the big sects, even those powerful families also wanted to contend. Very quickly, the price soon soared to 7 million crystal stones, which meant that each Dan were being sold for 700,000 crystal stones each. Xianxia didn't expect to reach this price, and the price was still constantly rising. 7.6 million. Gu Dongchen's heavy voice came over, and this made Xianxia even more happy. The whole auction field quieted down. This was almost the price limit. 7.7 million crystal stones. It was a patriarch of a family. If he could buy these 10 building foundation dawn, at the very least, they could nurture 2 to 3 true martial realm martial artists, which was totally worth it. 8 million. Gu Dongchen once again shouted. Xianxia secretly clenched his teeth. He was now extremely regretting the fact that he had sold the building foundation dan for just 500,000 each to Gu Dongchen earlier. 8.2 million. 8.3 million. After a moment of silence, the bidding once again became heated. If one had more building foundation dawn, some talented disciples of theirs could quickly stride into the true martial realm. Not to mention to these families, even in the big sects, there were not many true martial realm martial artists. 15 million. Gu Dongchen's voice resounded. Along the way, many people had competed with him, but finally, they were all defeated. It was evident that Gu Dongchen valued these building foundation dawn a lot. After a moment of silence, Mrs. Li shouted, 15 million. Going once. Xianxia, after seeing this, hastily shouted, Sister Menger, increase the price. If it is bought by you, it is still nothing. Anyway, I can return the crystal stones back to you. Little rascal, that guy is your dean. Hua Xiangyue was taken aback, but she was very much in favor of Chen Xiang's approach. Hey, of course I know. Chen Xiang laughed and said, 15 million going twice. Mrs. Li just finished shouting, before Lu Menger said in a light tone, 16 million. Gu Dongchen secretly clenched his teeth. He recognized that it was Lu Menger's voice. He was considering whether to increase the price or not. 16.2 million. Gu Dongchen and Wu Keiming both discussed for a while, before they decided to go for it. In any case, the crystal stones would inevitably return to her hands. That was why Lu Menger very freely raised the bid. Not to mention that with the stingy dean, Gu Dongchen, she could raise the price back and forth. 18 million. Lu Menger's light and sweet voice gave Gu Dongchen an urge to vomit blood. If he knew Chen Xiang was intentionally making Lu Menger raise the price with him, he would have definitely and immediately spat out blood. This could be counted as violation of rules, but Hua Xiangyue just turned a blind eye for it, because Chen Xiang was her own person. However, she didn't expect Chen Xiang would actually be bold enough to ruthlessly swindle his very own dean. Lu Menger kept her eyes on Chen Xiang's gestures and continued to increase the price. 18.5 million. 19.9 million. 20 million. Gu Dongchen's voice was incomparably heavy. Moreover, it already had a subtle hint of anger. Lu Menger gave a white eye to Chen Xiang. She, in accordance with Chen Xiang's intention, raised the price once again. Chen Xiang nodded his head and said with a mischievous laugh, Not bad. Wait till he had bought them. Afterwards, I will tell him it was auctioned by me. Ha ha ha. By then, it will definitely be cool. Both Hua Xiangyue and Lu Menger held admiration for Chen Xiang's approach. When they thought of Gu Dongchen's reaction at that time, they could not help but giggle. Lu Menger didn't raise the price again. Finally, the building foundation dawn had been bought by Gu Dongchen. Hua Xiangyue tenderly snorted and said, Gu Dongchen, this guy, Sai, isn't it just an extra 5 million? He had actually become angry. The first item auction set off a fierce competition, and because of that, the whole atmosphere of the auction turned a lot more lively. 20 million crystal stones were equal to 4,000 true elemental dan. Even for Chen Xiang, it was not a small number. He had painstakingly refined dawn for a whole month, yet its value was only a bit more. But this was under the case that he had the herbs. If he didn't have the herbs, then he would need to gather them by himself, which would be very troublesome. Earning the money of his martial nephew gave Chen Xiang a peace of mind. Seeing a happy smile hanging on his face, Hua Xiangyue and Lu Menger finally understood the reason. The more you touch things up, the darker they get. The next item was a 9th level spirit weapon, a sword. Chen Xiang and the others was not the least bit interested to this item. Chen Xiang already had a divine weapon, the Azure Dragon Slaughtering Devil Blade, and naturally spirit weapon would no longer be placed in his eyes. As for Lu Menger, she was a grand refiner. If she needed a weapon, she would just have to spend a bit of time, and that would be enough. However, to these deans and patriarchs it was very tempting, because they could use it as a reward to some outstanding disciples, which in turn would motivate the other disciples. For many sects and families, this was a very conventional approach. Very soon, an ardent struggle once again set off in the auction. The 9th-level spirit weapon could be considered as a rare thing. Only some famous figures could afford to please a powerful refiner to forge them such a weapon. What was totally out of Xianxia's expectation was that the 9th-level spirit weapon was finally bought by the Dean of the Lotus Island, Xianxia, for a sum of 45 million crystal stones. Xianxia took a deep breath. For the very first time, he understood that the 9th-level spirit weapon was so expensive. He glanced at Lu Menjie, while Lu Menjie also turned her head and gave him a wink. "This is a rich mistress," Xianxia lamented in his heart. Lu Menjie was a grand refiner, someone who could refine brilliant equipments. Refining spirit equipments was even easier for her. In addition to her reputation, her refined equipment would be sold at an even bigger price. Xianxia felt the little fortune he had in his hand was, in the eyes of these deans, nothing. Lu Menjie, by just casually refining a few formidable spirit weapons, she would then have earned more than what he had accumulated for a long time. "Sister Menjie, how long does it take for you to refine a 9th-level spirit weapon?" Xianxia curiously asked. At the same time, he was prepared to take rather a good blow. "Slowest would take 1 month, and my fastest speed would be 10 days. However, I, for a very long time, had not refined any," Lu Menjie leisurely replied. Xianxia had already made some psychological preparation, yet he was ruthlessly thrown down. Under Menjie, there are 10 outstanding grand refiners. General orders are taken up by them. Menjie now directly take orders of brilliant equipments. Hua Xiangyue laughingly said. Lu Menjie nodded her head. The imperial palace of the Divine Weapon Heavenly Empire was previously the Divine Weapon sect, and Lu Menjie was supervising many famous refiners. As such, she could get a lot of wealth. Xianxia, thinking of this, felt dreadful. He looked at those boxes and clasped his fists. He swore that he would certainly transcend these deans. In front of these deans, he knew that he was only an ant. If you could refine a powerful Dan, even Lu Menjie, such a reputed grand refiner, have to curry your favor. Su Meiyao said, as if she could see through Xiang's heart. Yes, even Shui, this little dragoness, also had to curry your favor. Bai Yuyu said. Xiang suspected that because of losing her power for too long, she was gradually waking up from the ruthless devil skill. To his surprise, she even knew how to make jokes. Although they were not really funny, this kind of transformation still made Xiang and Su Meiyao both very happy. A few other items auctioned were spirit equipments, either weapons or armors. Other items were relatively low price, like the 8th-level giant hammer, which was sold for 30 million crystal stones. The highest-priced item was an armor, a 9th-level spirit equipment, fetching a price of 50 million crystal stones. Xiang had the Azure Dragon Slaughtering Devil Blade and the Black Tortoise Adamantal Armor. That was why for him, he didn't held any interest for spirit weapons. Naturally, he didn't know their market price. Before, Xiang felt that his building foundation Dan was very valuable, but he didn't think that these spirit weapons were more expensive, which made him feel somewhat uncomfortable in his heart. Little rascal, Dawn are different from spirit weapons. Dawn, once bought, will then be used to elevate the strength, while spirit weapons will stay with a martial artist for a long time. In particular, a powerful spirit weapon could also save their life. Moreover, it would bring prestige to its user, and at the same time it would also elevate the martial artist's strength by a lot. In this kind of auctions, high-level Dawn very rarely appears, because these kinds of things are even rarer than spirit equipments and brilliant equipments. Lu Menjie, noticing Xiang's mood, explained. Xiang nodded his head. If an alchemist could refine an even higher-ranked Dan, the price would then reflect upon it. For an alchemist to become a Dan king, he would waste countless of precious spirit herbs. However, the dawn they would make were things which high-ranking refiners could never match. The next item to be auctioned was the elemental spirit Dan. Xiang looked towards Lu Menjie, laughed and said, Sister Menjie, I have to rely on you. Hua Xiangyue clenched her teeth. You must make this guy, Yu Jianglin, bleed. Lu Menjie didn't have any good impression towards Yu Jianglin. Among the 8 major righteous sects tycoons, Those who had good impressions towards Yu Jianglin were rather scarce, because no one could stand the bad-tempered proud sword sect. They were not even that strong, yet they were extremely arrogant. The elemental spirit Dan was not many, and for these Nirvana realm martial artists it didn't really held much value. However, for the martial artists of the extreme martial state and below it, the elemental spirit Dan was greatly useful. Xianxia had also eaten this Dan, which then allowed his divine soul to grow much bigger. It was quite clear how much spiritual power was contained within it. However, the value of the elemental spirit Dan was at most 1 to 200 million crystal stones. If one was not in urgent need, generally after this price it would not increase. Elemental spirit Dan, this is a kind of Dan which could quickly elevate its consumer's divine sense. This is an ancient Dan, and it has not appeared in the Qinwu mainland for a long time. But with regards to its efficacy, everyone should have a good understanding from the ancient records. Mrs. Li introduced the elemental spirit Dan. Everyone was no stranger to this. If the price was not too high, everyone intended to give it a try. The starting price is 500,000 crystal stones. Mrs. Li's voice had not resounded for long, but the proud sword sect's dean, Yu Jianglin, could not sit still. 1 million, Yu Jianglin shouted. 1.1 million. It was actually the dean of true martial sect, Tang Yichao. 1.3 million. The Lotus Island's dean also took part in it. Everyone were all very familiar with this because just a while ago he had already bought 2 items. 1.5 million. Yu Jiangling had not expected that there would be so many people to fight for it. He felt a little annoyed. For this elemental spirit Dan, he had waited for too long. Now, everyone contending for the elemental spirit Dan were those deans, even Gu Dongqin participated in it. They were all curious regarding the efficacy of the elemental spirit Dan. They were rather curious whether or not its efficacy was exactly the same with the ancient records. Very soon, the price reached 3 million. Tang Yichao had already quit. Gu Dongqin, the stingy dean, had also quit. Now, only the Lotus Island's dean, Lian Yingxiao and Yu Jianglin, were fighting it out. Beside the building foundation Dawn, Lian Yingxiao had fought for every other item. His voice was gentle and courteous, very soft, as if money was just a cow's dung to him. 5 million, 6 million, 7 million. Liang Yingxiao was actually in no hurry to settle the fight with Yu Jiangling. After a fierce battle, the price had already reached 9 million crystal stones. 10 million, I want it. Yu Jiangling's voice was low-spirited, yet furious, and it also had a hint of irritation and arrogance. An elemental spirit Dan fetching such a price left Xianxia a bit surprised. Lu Menger hadn't even made a sound yet. This was indeed the enchantment of an auction. 10 million going once. 10 million going twice. 10.2 million. Finally, it was Lu Menger's turn to take the stage. Xianxia grinned and said, "Want your ass? This is just the beginning." Hua Xiangyue also began giggling. She also wanted to see whether it would turn out to be as Chen Xiang had planned or not, because when discussing just a moment ago, Chen Xiang had set a very large amount as the limit. Hearing Lu Menger's voice, Gu Dongqin cursed. Once again, it's that woman. Yu Jianglin, this arrogant guy, is going to suffer. Wu Kaming faintly smiled. Lu Menger's wealth in the Qinwu mainland is second to none. I fear that only the mysterious dean of Danxiang Taoyuan and the dean of Lotus Island could compare with her. 12.2 million. Yu Jianglin was furious. If it wasn't Lu Menger who was raising the price, he would have already soared. Now, he was testing whether or not Lu Menger was interested in the elemental spirit Dan or not. 14 million. Lu Menger's voice was majestic, yet it sounded so nice. Blue veins bulged out on Yu Jiangling's forehead from anger, but he still had to raise the price. 14.5 million. From Yu Jiangling's tone, it sounded as if he was being whipped, forcing him to increase the price, which made Xianxia and the others directly happy. 15 million. Lu Menger's voice was so calm. She was a reputed wealthy mistress in the Qinwu mainland, and no one was surprised about her wealth. She was a grand refiner before. She had not participated in the auction of spirit weapons, so it was also reasonable for her to compete for the Dawn. 15.3 million. 16 million. Very soon, the price had already reached 30 million. Lu Menjie glanced at Xianxia, only to see Xianxia shook his head. Last time. This guy wanted to kill me. Continue. Lu Menjie continued to raise the price, and this left Yu Zhonglin completely furious. However, he could not do anything because he wanted this elemental spirit Dan. He had waited for more than 1,000 years for it to appear. If he missed this opportunity, only God knows when it would appear again. If his son failed to break through, he would die of old age. That was why he would not hesitate to buy it at all cost. Just a while ago, the price of the 10-building foundation dawn reaching 20 million had left everyone surprised. But now, this was only a elemental spirit Dan, yet it could even reach a price of 30 million. This was even more astonishing to the others. Gu Dongqin was now gloating. Now there was finally someone who was going to experience the same suffering as him, and it was even worse than what he had suffered. Lu Menjie thought of how Xianxia was almost killed by Yu Zhonglin, and in her heart, she was also slightly furious, so she continued to raise the price. 59.5 million. With Lu Menjie's sweet voice, everyone's heart jumped out of their throat. This was only a low-grade profound level Dan, nothing more, yet it had reached such an exorbitant price. Yu Zhonglin wanted to ask Lu Menjie what the hell she was going to do with the elemental spirit Dan. She had even insisted with him to this point. Soon the price would reach 60 million, and since the beginning of this auction, it was the highest-priced item. The whole field was quiet. Lu Menjie and Hua Xiangyue were also a little worried. They were looking at Chen Xiang with bitterness. When it was 59 million, they already wanted to stop. Yet Chen Xiang wanted Lu Menjie to keep on going. If Yu Zhonglin didn't buy, wouldn't they miss such a good opportunity? He will buy, don't worry. Chen Xiang was very calm. If Yu Zhonglin wished to give up, he would have done it long ago. This was related with his son's breakthrough, so he wouldn't hesitate to buy at all costs. Yu Zhonglin could not be called arrogant anymore, because his arrogance had rushed to his head. Now, he had turned supercilious and very rampant. Generally speaking, this kind of people would care so much about their face. Because his son had been stuck in the 9th level of the true martial realm for so long, it would certainly be detrimental to his prestige. If his son could be as talented as before, then it would increase his glory and prestige. Just as Chen Xiang's words fell, Yu Zhonglin clenched his teeth and shouted, 60 million! If his voice could kill someone, his voice would have already killed the entire audiences completely. No one was oblivious to Yu Zhonglin's anger. For just a low-grade profound level Dan, he was bleeding greatly. Chen Xiang slightly pursed his mouth and nodded his head in satisfaction. Lu Menjie didn't increase the price again. She and Hua Xiangyue both heaved a sigh of relief. At the same time, they were rather excited. Menjie, this guy will definitely hate you, Hua Xiangyue said while laughing. I'm not afraid of him. In this guy's eyes, everyone is just the same, his enemies. Lu Menjie lightly scoffed and said. Mrs. Li was also sweating profusely. Now that Lu Menjie didn't raise the price again, she shouted, 60 million going once, 60 million going twice, 60 million going thrice. Sold. Congratulations to the 6th Room's VIP for the successful acquisition of the elemental spirit Dan for 60 million crystal stones. At this moment, the blood and chi of Yu Zhonglin was completely chaotic. He almost vomited blood. However, he didn't dare to make trouble here. So he hastily left the VIP room and went to complete the final procedure. Hua Xiangyue at this time also left, and the auction was also suspended to allow those successful bidders to finish trading. Once Hua Xiangyue came back, she handed a storage pouch to Chen Xiang filled with 16,000 true elemental dawn. His building foundation dawn and the elemental spirit Dan sold for a total of 80 million crystal stones, which was equivalent to 16,000 elemental spirit dawn. Because Hua Xiangyue and Chen Xiang were acquaintances, there was no charge for Chen Xiang. Otherwise, a part of it would have been paid to the Danxiang Tower. In addition to the 14,000 elemental spirit Dan he had from before, now he a grand total of 30,000 true elemental dawn, which was equivalent to 150 million crystal stones. The next thing is also very rare. This is neither a Dan nor a spirit weapon. Let me present you the martial soul which you all had read in the records. Mrs. Li dismissively said, yet in her heart, she was also very surprised. She too had never seen this kind of thing. On the auctioning platform, there was a table. Above it was a transparent bottle, and inside the transparent bottle, there was a mass of flame-like thing, scurrying around, looking like a fire sprite. It is actually a fire martial soul, Gu Dongchen shouted. His voice was unable to conceal his excitement. Who the hell was it? He could actually bear to sell this kind of thing. But this is good too. Now we can also see how the hell this legendary thing is mystical. The voice of the Lotus Island's dean was also filled with astonishment. The originally quiet auction seethed in excitement. It turned very lively as everyone was discussing about the fire martial soul. The Danxiang Tower's reputation was very good, and they would certainly not deceive them. That was why everyone, regarding the authenticity of the fire martial soul, was not suspicious. Looking at everyone's current appearance, Xianxia's eye happened to shine, because he knew that another ardent bidding battle was going to happen soon. Lu Menjie was rather unconcerned. As she took a glance over the book in her hands, she said, "These are things that are going to appear last. They are definitely very expensive." This book was just taken out by Hua Xiangyue, and Xiang hadn't read it yet. It was an index of things which were going to be auctioned later. The starting price is 10 million crystal stones. Everyone should be clear of the fire martial soul's value. I'll also not say much anymore. Mrs. Li slightly smiled and said, "A starting price of 10 million, it was indeed a formidable item." Because Hua Xiangyue knew that Xiang was lacking in crystal stones, it was better to place the fire martial soul ahead, during the beginning of the final phase of the auction. This would also let Xiang raise a large sum, but she still believed that Xiang would finally turn to her and Lu Menjie to borrow, because a lot of rare spirit herbs were going to be auctioned next. Hua Xiangyue and Lu Menjie were only interested in these spirit herbs. Lu Menjie's purpose for coming here was also to gather some spirit herbs. She needed some herbs of high-level dawn for herself. For martial artists of her level, only the earth-level dawn and above had an obvious effect on her. Not only were these herbs very expensive, they were similarly extremely rare. Xiang knew Lu Menjie was making preparations for crossing her tribulation, and a dan was absolutely necessary. For instance, a few dawn would allow their consumers to quickly restore their power, and some other dawn could allow their consumer to recover from injuries in an instant, which while crossing the tribulation could play a great role. It was equivalent to possessing a few extra lives. Lu Menjie didn't know alchemy. She was only gathering herbs. She was planning to seek high-level alchemists to refine them for her. That was why high-level alchemists could not, in a million times, be offended. This was but related to whether they could successfully cross all of their nirvana tribulation and eventually ascend to the heavenly realm. In order to get the Dan refined, Lu Menjie had gone to ask Elder Dan. Xiang, from Lu Menjie and Hua Xiangyue's relation, could notice that Lu Menjie might have asked the Danxiang Taoyuan's dean to refine a Dan for her through Hua Xiangyue. That was also the reason why their relation was so good. Although those who had martial soul were not very easily seen, they were still there, but they all hid themselves very well because this was their hidden card up their sleeve. Now, the fire martial soul happened to create an ardent struggle among these tycoons, and very soon the price rose to 80 million crystal stones. Until now, Gu Dongchen, Tang Yichao, Liang Yingxiao all were still competing. At the very beginning, the elder of Beast Martial Sect and Yu Jiangling were also competing, but finally they eventually gave up. They were both very clear that it would soon reach an exorbitant price. 95 million. It was Gu Dongchen's voice. Xianxia could not understand what his eldest martial nephew wanted to do with the fire martial soul. 100 million. Lian Yingxiao dismissively said. The price had suddenly reached 100 million, causing the entire audience to be in uproar. Xianxia didn't expect that when he had killed the crown prince, he would actually obtain such a precious thing. Why is the Lotus Island's dean so rich? What does he do? Xianxia asked. The Lotus Island's dean had once presented him a white jade lotus seed, and he also had a very favorable impression of him. It was just that the Lotus Island was a little mysterious. Xianxia once had checked some information about the Lotus Island, but it was not detailed. The Lotus Island, in the entire Qinwu mainland, is the one influence with the most crystal mines. The disciples of the Lotus Island are all very much specialized in water. Hence they could find many large veins in the depths of the sea. They seem to have a secret way to find the veins. Moreover, in the depths of the sea, There are many hidden deep water plants that could replace many rare spirit herbs. As such, the overall strength of the Lotus Island is very strong. Lu Menjie replied. Xianxia was still a little confused. Why can I not find any information regarding this? The Lotus Island intentionally hid this very fact. If many people came to know about it, many will then squeeze into the Lotus Island. Hua Xiangyue explained. Moreover, the major sect's dean, in order to prevent their own sect's disciples to risk their lives for searching crystal mines in the sea, intentionally did not said anything. Lu Menjie sighed. Since ancient times, too many people had lost their lives in the sea, but those who could find the veins was only Lotus Island. That's why the major forces of the Qinwu mainland intentionally hid the information about the Lotus Island. Hua Xiangyue casted a glance at Xianxia. You brat, don't go seeking death. Although the sea may look simple, the danger it possesses is not less than on land. Xianxia laughed and said, Don't worry, I now have a beautiful wife. I'll not be stupid enough to die. After speaking, he looked at Lu Menjie, which made Lu Menjie and Hua Xiangyue to show him the white of their eyes. Although Xianxia said so, he still decided to go and have a look. He had the Emperor Crystal, so he was not afraid of not finding any crystal vein. If he found one, he could take out those top-grade crystal stones. 122 million. It was Gu Dongchen's voice. From his tone, he seemed to be full of passion. After all, the fire marshal soul was truly valuable, unlike the previous building foundation Dan, where he was obviously being swindled. 125 million. Lian Yingxiao was not going to give the slightest bit of concession as he continued to raise the price. His gentle voice was rather loud, and it was clear that he was also very much looking forward to the fire marshal soul. Gu Dongchen clenched his teeth and continued to shout, 130 million! Lian Yingxiao knew that the other party was Gu Dongchen, yet it just made his desire to win increase. 135 million. Obediently continue. Chun Xiang shouted in excitement. 140 million. Gu Dongchen's voice left Chun Xiang a little surprised, for he didn't that expect his stingy martial nephew could actually fight to this step. Lian Yingxiao, unlike before, didn't raise the price immediately. This left the entire audience in secret anticipation. They wanted to know who would eventually win. 140 million going first. 140 million going twice. 140 million. 150 million. Lian Yingxiao suddenly shouted. His voice was still so gentle, moreover. He raised the price by 10 million in one go, which left everyone extremely amazed. This guy truly have deep pockets. Hua Xiang lightly scoffed. Gu Dongchen didn't raise the price again, because there may be better stuff later. By then, such a little difference would render him unable to buy, which was not worth it. At last, the fire marshal soul was successfully bought by Lian Yingxiao. Regarding the fire marshal soul, Lian Yingxiao was very curious. After he successfully won the bidding, he immediately went to pay. When Hua Xiangyue noticed Lian Yingxiao leave his room, she also immediately left. Chun Xiang took the brochure, which only Hua Xiangyue could see. The others didn't know what was going to be auctioned next. This also added up to the mystery of the auction. Chun Xiang, after seeing that the next several good items going to be auctioned were spirit weapons, could not help but yawn. Hua Xiangyue came back and threw a storage pouch to Chun Xiang. Inside it, there were 30,000 true elemental dawn, which was worth 150 million crystal stones. Now, Chun Xiang had a total of 60,000 true elemental dawn. Sister Menjie, if you need a spirit herb, I can give you the white jade lotus seed. I currently have no use for it, and then there is also the hell spirit grass. I can also give you a little. Chun Xiang very generously said. After all, she was his woman with whom he had kissed a good several times. Moreover, those kisses were very long and passionate. They had both fallen in love to each other, however. Neither of them have said it directly, that was all. However, they both understood the other party's intention. Lu Menjie felt warmth in her heart as a charming smile appeared on her face. She tenderly spoke. Not for the time being. If I need it at that time, you have to remember what you had just said. I will keep it for you. Chun Xiang laughed. He had the golden dragon saliva. and he had already planted a large number of white jade lotus seed. By that time, he could have as much white jade lotus seed as he wished. It would be similar to common cabbages. Xianxia pouted with a tender snort. When will I have a man so generous to me? Oh, jealous? Lu Menjie covered her mouth as she lightly laughed. Xianxia stuck out her fragrant tongue, before she lamented. Why don't I have a fairy-like apprentice? Seductress, don't say that. Every time this little rascal sees you, he could not wait to strip off your clothes. You are very tempting to him, however. He could only dare to think, but not dare to do anything. Seeing these two women giving sarcastic remarks to each other, Xianxia shook his head and sighed. He just continued to look at that brochure. Five-colored profound fruit. This is one of the main herbs for refining the 5 elements true elemental Dan. Xianxia, in his heart, was shocked. He was also secretly excited. Xianxia continued to read the brochure, and the more he looked, the more excited he became. His breathing became very short and rapid, and at this time, Xianxia quickly seized the brochure. Little rascal, are you stunned? Xianxia grinned and asked. Xianxia was indeed stunned. At the same time, he was still in doubt as a frightened look appeared on his face. Which idiot is actually willing to take out an earth-level spirit herb, and even a brilliant equipment? Xianxia suddenly giggled and said, Which idiot is selling the earth-level spirit herb? I do not know. However, I know that the idiot selling the brilliant equipment is your sister Menjie. Lu Menjie snappily snorted. The fact that she was selling brilliant equipment was nothing surprising. A lot of deans knew about this. Not many individuals were able to refine brilliant equipments, which was why they were rather more expensive, even among the other various things up for auction. Next, we are going to auction a spirit fruit called the lightning element fruit. This fruit is very strange. If it is eaten by a martial artist with lightning attributed true chi, his lightning attribute true chi will increase by a large amount. In addition to this fruit can also explode. If used improperly, it will be very dangerous. Mrs. Li continued to explain the usefulness of lightning element fruit and other important details. Lu Menjie shook her head. Useless, Xianxia said. Some people always think of auctioning some strange and mystical things, praying they'll bump into an idiot and then it can be sold at a very high price. The instant Xianxia caught sight of lightning element fruit, his eyes started to shine. Sumeyao had told him just a moment ago that this lightning element fruit had a big magical effect. To be specific, it was a herb used for refining a dan, a kind of dan which was not eaten but rather used to attack. Once it was thrown out, it would release a very strong power, capable of blasting off a big mountain. However, other herbs were also needed before such a strong dan could be created. Heavenly Lightning Pellet, even a 9th-level true martial realm martial artist would not dare to meet it head-on. After acquiring this lightning element fruit, you will also need a profound lightning seed before infusing a large amount of lightning attribute true chi. Only then you will be able to successfully refine it. With just a pellet, you could blast a 5th-level true martial realm martial artist into pieces. Bai Yu said. She and Sumeyao could be described as someone who had went through fire and water together. From their childhood to adulthood, these two had rarely been separated. That was why she too had an understanding of the Dan recipe. This could blast a 5th-level true martial realm martial artist into pieces. This kind of thing left Xianxia rather shocked. It was also the first time he came to learn of a type of Dan which could be used like that. If you had a few pellets, you could even blow up a 9th-level true martial realm martial artist. However, the effect wouldn't be that large against an extreme state martial artist. Sumeyao said. Xianxia had already decided after he had bought the lightning element fruit, he would plant them after returning to the Elder Dan courtyard. Upset is 1,000,000 crystal stones. Mrs. Li shouted. Nobody actually wanted to bid. They had heard Mrs. Li narration. The usefulness of lightning element fruit was too small. Moreover, there was a limit of increasing the lightning attribute true chi. The fruit's effects weren't that good, it was just relatively rare, nothing more. 1.1 million. Xianxia changed his voice and shouted in a low-spirited voice. If he had used his own voice, many would definitely and maliciously raise the price against him. By then, a heavy loss would be inevitable. There was an idiot who was willing to buy this thing. Everyone felt that might as well bought some true elemental dawn. That would have been more cost-effective. Little rascal, is this thing useful? Hua Xiangyue asked. She knew Xianxia was not someone stupid. Xianxia didn't answer. He was waiting for Mrs. Li to eventually drop the hammer. No one raised the price, so Xianxia very easily bought the lightning element fruit. He laughed and said, "This is a good thing, but I can't show it to you right now. Wait for me to collect another herb. Then I'll let you know I haven't spent these crystal stones in vain." It was also normal for some upsetting things to occasionally appear in the auction. However, under ordinary situations it would just be bought by an idiot. Next is a high-grade earth-level spirit herb, the resurrection grass. Even though it is not as good as white jade lotus seed and hell spirit grass raw, the resurrection dan that could be refined after combining it with other herbs is far more precious. Even if a Nirvana realm martial artist suffered heavy injuries, taking a single resurrection dan would immediately restore them to their pinnacle state. Mrs. Li introduced the next item. Xianxia had read the brochure just a moment ago. He had not expected someone would actually sell the high-grade earth-level resurrection grass. It was a crystal-clear grass that contained a unique energy. If eaten raw, one could quickly restore some injuries, but it was far better used as a returning life dan. Among the high-grade earth-level dan, the resurrection dan was the most famous healing dan, basically exclusively used by Nirvana realm martial artists. After achieving that kind of level, the body and the soul both were very strong. Only this level of spirit dan could be effective on them. For the true martial realm and the extreme state martial artist, the dawn used were from low-level profound level dawn to low-grade earth-level dawn. As for Nirvana realm martial artists, it was middle-grade and high-grade earth-level dawn. Of course, heaven-level dawn were also useful, but they were very scarce. Sometimes even if a Nirvana realm martial artist had it, they could not bear to use it. There is no upset. Everyone can start at your own discretion. Mrs. Li slightly smiled and said, 10 million. Lu Menjur lightly shouted. Seeing Lu Menjur taking action, Xianxia shook his head and sighed. He knew he didn't have any chance. Lu Menjur wanting the resurrection grass was also very normal, as she was going to cross her nirvana tribulation. If she had the resurrection dan, it would be equivalent to another life. You also want it? Lu Menjur asked. I do. But Sister Menjur needs it more than me. I just want it for the sake of collection. Xianxia laughed and said, if Lu Menjur wanted, he would not hesitate to give even the hell spirit grass and white jade lotus seed. 13 million. Gu Dongchen also participated in the bidding. Although these deans didn't refine dawn, they all knew very well the value of the resurrection grass. They all knew very well. Hua Xiangyue just glanced at the side. She knew Lu Menjur was going to cross the tribulation, so she didn't bid. Not to mention fighting with Lu Menjur would make it so the auctioneer selling the spirit grass would make a large final profit. Soon the price hit 90 million. I must win. Lu Menjur slightly frowned. Then she continued to raise the price. 95 million. It was only a spirit grass, nothing more. Moreover, the alchemist would not necessarily be successful in refining the dan. The risk was truly very big, yet these tycoons still vied with each other. 100 million. Lian Yingxiao didn't back down. Even if he knew he was facing the divine weapon Heavenly Empire's Empress and extreme martial sex Gu Dongchen, he was going to struggle no matter what. Xianxia just dumbfoundedly stared onwards. He was never able to figure out from where the price was being increased. Just as anyone's voice befell, it would be immediately followed by another increment. In the blink of an eye, the price had already reached 200 million. Only Lu Menjur and Lian Yingxiao adhered till now. All the other deans had already been defeated. Although everyone had the capital, their capital was not as much as these two. In the Qinwu mainland there are 5 plutocrats: Lu Menjur, Lian Yingxiao, Elder Dan, Gu Dongchen, and finally our mysterious dean. The extreme martial sect had occupied 2 seats, while the women occupied more than a half. Hua Xiangyue laughed and said. Lu Menjur continued to shout, 230 million. 240 million. 250 million. Both were increasing the price by 10 million after 10 million. After all, the fight was happening among the 2 plutocrats. everyone did not find it strange. Xianxia had a complete new outlook. He had a total fortune of 300 million left, but this small resurrection grass had already surpassed this number. 330 million. Lu Menger's voice was still dull and filled with majesty. Lian Yingxiao no longer continued. This was almost his limit. After Lu Menger had successfully acquisitioned the resurrection grass, she immediately left the room and bought back the resurrection grass. Xianxia, while looking at the exquisite grass on his palm, was extremely shocked in his heart. This was the resurrection grass worth more than 300 million crystal stones. He could clearly feel the peculiar life force inside it. By chance, if the alchemist failed in refining, won't more than 300 million crystal stones go down the drain? Xianxia asked as he returned the resurrection grass to Lu Menger. Whatever, in any case, I have already been accustomed to it. Lu Menger lightly gave a sigh. It was quite clear that she had lost a lot in many years. In Xianxia's mind suddenly flashed an idea. Sister Menger, can you let me take care of the resurrection grass? I'll plant it inside the extreme martial mysterious realm. There it can grow even better. For now, it should not be a problem for you to not quickly give it to some alchemist for refining. Lu Menger thought for a moment, nodded her head and said, It's not a problem, however, you cannot eat it. This is very important for me. While speaking, she then handed the resurrection grass to Xianxia. This kind of forthrightness caused Xianxia to feel a little surprised. He didn't expect Lu Menger would so easily put the resurrection grass into his custody. This made him feel warm in his heart. Next there are 2 5-colored profound fruits, which is the main ingredient for refining the 5 elements true elemental dan. From what I remember, the 5 elements true elemental dan have not appeared in the Qinwu mainland for a very long time. Mrs. Li introduced another item, the 5 elements true elemental dan, which among the low-grade profound level dan, was on par with the elemental spirit dan, whether it was the difficulty in refining it or the rarity of its herbs. As Mrs. Li introduced the next item, Xianxia was secretly excited. He already had the 5-colored lotus, so if he bought the 2 5-colored profound fruits, he would then have to only search for the colorless spirit grass and the 5 leaves grass. By that time, he would have all the herbs of the 5 elements true elemental dan. Starting price is 2 million crystal stones. Everyone is free to raise the price. 2.2 million. Gu Dongchen too was interested in this thing. 2.3 million. Xianxia immediately shouted, from looking at the starting price, the final price would not be too high. He had 300 million crystal stones. He had the confidence that it was more than enough. 2.5 million. Lian Yingxiao, this wealthy guy, would always increase the price rather by a large amount. Xianxia said in a heavy tone, 2.6 million. 2.8 million. Gu Dongchen actually increased the price by 200,000. Xianxia felt rather strange. He knew that his martial nephew was quite stingy. Xianxia simply didn't shout. He was going to let the both of them compete to the end. In that way he could save a bit of his strength. After a short while, under Lian Yingxiao's and Gu Dongchen's competition, the price had reached 13 million crystal stones, which had already surpassed the value of the 5-colored profound fruit. However, the 5-colored profound fruit was already very rare, and even though its rank was very low, some collectors would definitely buy it rather at a very high price. Gu Dongchen no longer continued to bid, and just when Lian Yingxiao was secretly feeling proud, Xianxia shouted, 13.05 million. Humph! For someone more miser than your dean, you had the nerve to call such a price. Hua Xiangyue ridiculed. This was also the very first time the price rose by such a small amount in this auction. Moreover, the price came from someone from the VIP box, although no one knew who it was. Xianxia was unlike those deans who had a bunch of people earning wealth for them. Not to mention there were no restrictions regarding the increment in price, and it was quite obvious he was indifferent regarding such actions. No one knows me. Xianxia pursed his lips and said, The misers are rather thick-skinned. I'm not like each and every one of you, a local tyrant. Lian Yingxiao also felt funny. Someone actually raised the price with such an amount. It was the first for him encountering such a kind of person. He truly wanted to have a look who was it on the other side who could occupy a VIP box, yet could be so stingy that he even left Gu Dongchen, this famous stingy figure, behind. 14 million. Lian Yingxiao didn't even bat an eye when he raised the price. 14.01 million. Chun Xiang only increased it by 10,000. 15 million. 15.01 million. The auction house suddenly burst into hustle and bustle. There was actually someone so thick-skinned to increase it by such a meager amount. After a while, 21.01 million. Chun Xiang lazily shouted. Lian Yingxiao no longer continued. He felt that it was a little boring. Although he was rich, he would not so casually spend. This was only a herb for a low-grade profound level Dan. The price had already reached far more than its own value, and if this continued, he was going to lose a lot. As long as it was a spirit herb in Chun Xiang's eyes, it was not a loss, because he could grow a large number of them. Finally, he acquired it for a value of 21.01 million crystal stones. The next thing turned out to be sword. It was a brilliant level equipment. The brilliant equipment were the same as spirit equipment. They were divided into 9 levels. The 9th level brilliant equipment was already the topmost equipment in the mortal world, and now a 4th level brilliant weapon just happened to be auctioned, the meteor sword, which was posted by Lu Menger. Because she had just refined it, it was still unranked. Only 4th level, yet it made the heart of many sword users among the audiences beat rapidly. The brilliant weapon they were all using were of 4th or 5th level, nothing more, but this kind of thing was the more the better. They obviously wanted to include it in their bag. After Mrs. Li introduced the meteor sword, the bidding began directly. What left Chun Xiang surprised was that even Hua Xiangyue and Wu Kaming participated among with the others. Everyone in the VIP box beside Chun Xiang and Lu Menger heedlessly increased the price. The temptation of a 4th level brilliant weapon was truly amazing. I had spent 8 years to finish this meteor sword. Lu Menger's tone was filled with a kind of sad mood. She had personally refined this brilliant weapon. Moreover, she had spent so many years of time. The price kept on soaring and soaring, 10 million upon 10 million. Sometimes it was even tens of millions. In the blink of an eye, the price had already reached 500 millions. Chun Xiang, after seeing this, secretly clucked his tongue. However, he knew that if it was the Resurrection Dan being auctioned now, the increment definitely would have been more intense, because it could rescue a Nirvana realm martial artist from his grave. 800 million, 900 million, 1 billion. Not long after, the price finally broke the billion mark, and yet the intense competition was not showing any sign of stopping. 1.5 billion, Lian Yingxiao shouted. The gentleness and courteousness in his voice had already disappeared. It was replaced with an incomparable excitement. Hua Xiangyue slightly sighed. I give up. I'll just gather material for Menger to refine. The auction house suddenly quieted down. Lian Yingxiao, in one breath, had added 500 million, which left the other tycoons a little unable to bear. No one fought with Lian Yingxiao again, and finally it was bought by Lian Yingxiao for 1.5 billion. After this, Lian Yingxiao rarely participated in any other bidding battle. Apparently, after buying the meteor sword, he didn't have enough courage and energy anymore. Subsequently, Lu Menger fiercely entered the bidding battle. She bought a 9 elements flower, which was also the main herb for refining the Resurrection Dan. For this item, she had spent 350 million crystal stones, and thereafter, she once again spent 500 million crystal stones to buy a stone, and 700 million crystal stones to buy a big piece of yellow jade. There were not many herbs in the auction, which was quite disappointing for Chun Xiang. He only bought the 5-colored profound fruit, which made him feel good. The next is a bizarre piece of stone. This piece of stone can release a very intense spiritual pressure. However, it is currently sealed. Even extreme state martial artists under this spiritual pressure are unable to bear. The starting price is 50 million crystal stones. Dragon soul, Long Shui exclaimed. Dragon soul, for a dragon, it was the most essential element. As for Chun Xiang, it was a little hard for him to believe that a dragon soul would appear in the mortal world. Even more so was the fact that it was sealed inside a piece of stone. A stone exuding azure light was placed upon a table on the auctioning platform. Once this piece of stone appeared, everyone felt an inexplicable spiritual pressure. Even the charming eyebrows of Lu Menger and Hua Xiangyue were frowning. This kind of feeling was making them a little uncomfortable. But on the other hand, Xiang didn't felt anything. Very overbearing spiritual pressure. What the hell is inside this stone? Lu Menger's voice was deep and low, as well as solemn. She realized that there was nothing ordinary about this stone. Long Shui said to Xiang, "You must definitely buy this stone. Your Azure Dragon slaughtering devil blade is lacking an overbearing dragon soul, and that is why it cannot be considered as a divine weapon." Before, Su Meiyao had also said that after he had fused with the Azure Dragon slaughtering devil blade, she had always felt that it was lacking something. For example, his black tortoise adamantal armor and Lu Menger's vermilion bird tender thread could be infused with their users and could transform at ease. However, his Azure Dragon slaughtering devil blade was nothing like them. What would be the Azure Dragon slaughtering devil blade like if it was complete? Xianxia had no idea, but now he had an opportunity to make the Azure Dragon slaughtering devil blade complete, and that was only possible if he could buy this dragon soul. These deans increased the price one after another. In the previous bidding, majority of the deans had bought some relatively expensive stuff, so they had already spent a lot of amount of money, yet Xianxia, after noticing them once again so ardently enter the bidding battle, the pressure upon him multiplied. Is it really a dragon soul? Xianxia, using his divine sense, exchanged with Long Shui. Yes, moreover there is also no consciousness. It should have fallen from the heavenly realm. This guy's body must have been destroyed, and then sealed inside the stone after its consciousness was erased by someone. However, how it fell in the mortal world I have no idea. Till now, I also don't know why I was born in the mortal world. Long Shui said, because these deans had all felt that spiritual pressure. They believed that the mystery behind the stone was marvelous. Even if it was sealed, the pressure was already so strong. If the seal was dispelled, then perhaps even they would have a hard time bearing that spiritual pressure. Lu Menger also joined in. 600 million, Gu Dongqin shouted. Before, he had also bought a lot of things, but his pockets were still so full, such that even Lian Yingxiao paled in comparison. Hua Xiangyue, at this time, left, because she too had bought some things a moment ago, and the owner was urging her to pay quickly. Xiang only had a little money, which was simply not enough. However, he must win at all costs. Although at this moment Lu Menger was planning to relinquish, spending so much for an unknown piece of stone was simply not worth it. Sister Menger, you must win that piece of stone. Xiang threw Lu Menger a storage pouch. Inside the bag, there were true elemental dawn worth 300 million crystal stones. Why? Lu Menger, noticing Xiang was so serious, realized that the piece of stone was rather very important to Xiang. Sister Menger, both your vermilion bird tender thread and my black tortoise adamantal armor can infuse with our body, but the Azure Dragon slaughtering devil blade can't. That is because it is lacking a weapon soul. In that stone, a powerful soul is sealed within, and it is very suitable for fusing with my Azure Dragon slaughtering devil blade. Xiang quickly explained. Hearing Xiang's explanation, Lu Menger, who was a grand refiner, could not help but be surprised. But she was not a least bit suspicious regarding Xiang's word. She sweetly smiled. Leave it to me. 620 million. Lu Menger had obtained Xiang's 300 million crystal stones, and at this moment, she was brimming with courage and energy. Not to mention that if she had bought the stone, Xiang's Azure Dragon slaughtering blade could become stronger. Lu Menger had always felt grateful to Xiang, because he had made her fuse with the vermilion bird tender thread. In addition, he had also passed her the vermilion bird divine exercise, and this kind of powerful exercise had allowed her to make great progress in regard to her cultivation in flames. Later on, Xiang had also made her fuse with a fire spirit. As such, what she had obtained from Xiang could not be measured with wealth. Later on, Sister Menger must help me fuse that soul into the Azure Dragon slaughtering devil blade. Xiang laughed and said. Lu Menger, for the very first time, heard of something about weapon soul, and this gave her a great inspiration. If she could fuse some spirit beasts or profound beast soul with the equipment when refining, then the brilliant equipments and the spirit equipments could become even more powerful. She was very much curious how Xiang knew about these. This knowledge was obviously not from the Qinwu mainland. Now that he had the help of Lu Menger's cauldron, Xianxia heaved a sigh of relief. Soon, Lu Menjie finally won that piece of stone at the price of 980 million crystal stones. With this, the auction also came to an end. After Lu Menjie obtained the stone, she quickly left with Xianxia. While only God knows where Xianxia had gone to, she had not returned at all. Lu Menjie, after touching the stone, became even more excited. She could determine that there was certainly a very powerful soul inside, though she didn't know whose soul was it. It was so powerful that even across 2 layers of seal, it could still give such a mighty spiritual pressure. In the divine weapon shop, Lu Menjie with Xianxia entered a private room. She tightly laid down a few barriers. This was also what a Nirvana realm refiner was most specialized in. Lu Menjie had a very solemn look as she put on a black tights, while Xianxia also took out his azure dragon slaughtering devil blade. Whose soul is it? It is actually so powerful. Lu Menjie began to examine the spirit patterns on the outer seal of the stone. With one glance, she noticed that the outer layer was added later on. Dragon soul. Once she heard these 2 words, Lu Menjie's tender body slightly quivered as her face was filled with astonishment. Really? Lu Menjie took a long deep breath. Xianxia continuously nodded his head. Yes, otherwise, how could it be worthy of my azure dragon slaughtering devil blade? Are you prepared? Once I dispel the outer seal, a powerful spiritual attack will definitely break out. I'm worried you will not be able to endure, Lu Menjie said. According to Mrs. Li's introduction, even extreme state martial artist would not be able to endure the spiritual pressure released by this stone. Xianxia nodded his head as he placed the azure dragon slaughtering devil blade on the ground, then sat down cross-legged. Lu Menjie also gracefully sat down while facing Xianxia, with the azure dragon slaughtering devil blade in between them. Lu Menjie closed her eyes, and a golden brilliance burst out of her finger as she lightly stroked that green stone. Suddenly, an azure light flashed out from the green stone as Lu Menjie uttered a dull and tender shout. At the same time, Xianxia a sharp pain in his head. But soon it was all right. You're unexpectedly all right? Lu Menjie was once again shocked. She originally believed Xianxia should have become unconscious. Hey, I'm not that useless as you imagine. Xianxia laughed gently. Lu Menjie thought that Xianxia was not so common, for she knew that only someone with a very powerful divine sense could be able to bear the spiritual pressure emitted by the dragon soul. She knew that this spiritual pressure was something a true martial realm martial artist could not resist. Lu Menjie could now surely say that Xianxia's divine sense was very, very strong. Otherwise, just like her, he would not be able to sit without feeling anything here. I'm going to begin. As long as the stone is broken, the final seal will be broken. This piece of stone is commonly known as the sealing soul stone. After it is smashed, the seal will break open. Lu Menjie solemnly explained. While speaking, she took that piece of stone and smashed it against the azure dragon's slaughtering devil blade. After the stone was broken, an even fiercer spiritual attack wave invaded their conscious. Instantly, both Lu Menjie and Xianxia uttered a sharp scream at the same time, but very soon it came to pass. Sister Menjie, force the dragon soul into the azure dragon slaughtering devil blade with your divine sense. It was Long Shui imitating Xianxia's voice, for he was still half dazed at the moment. Lu Menjie soon recovered and immediately followed Long Shui's instructions. With her divine sense, she pressed upon that azure fire-like thing winding around the azure dragon's slaughtering devil blade, but was met with a very intense resistance. Is this really okay? Lu Menjie hesitated because the resistance of the dragon soul was very strong, making it difficult for her to suppress it. Use your vermilion bird tender thread. Not only can it not wrap and suppress material things, it can do the same to the soul. Long Shui imitated Xianxia's voice once more and explained what to do. Lu Menjie suddenly felt Xianxia had the atmosphere of an expert. He unexpectedly knew so many things, all of which she had no idea of. It should be remembered that she was the most powerful refiner in the entire Qinwu mainland. At this moment, a transparent ribbon appeared on Lu Menjie's jade-like palm. With her control and manipulation, This transparent ribbon transformed into countless very fine transparent threads, which then nimbly entwined around the azure dragon's slaughtering devil blade, and soon completely covered the blade. At this point, Lu Menjur felt the process was a lot easier. Moreover, she could also sense the dragon soul drilling bit by bit into the azure dragon's slaughtering devil blade. The stabbing pain in Xianxia's mind had disappeared by this point. His complexion was still a little pale. At this moment, Lu Menjur was looking at him like she was looking at a monster. She was now even more curious about Xianxia. Little rascal. You have a lot of confidential secrets. Lu Menjur smiled, before she extended her hand and stroked Xianxia's pale handsome face. Xianxia reached out his hand in return and pressed upon the back of her hand, making her tender hand glue closely to his cheek. With a look of enjoyment, he said, Sister Menjur, there are some things which I can't tell you, please do forgive me. Of course I know that. I'm not stupid. Lu Menjur lightly sighed and replied. She then looked at the vermilion bird tender thread entwined around the azure dragon's slaughtering devil blade. Suddenly, the azure dragon's slaughtering devil blade started shaking. Lu Menjur quickly withdrew the vermilion bird tender thread, before the dense spirit patterns on the azure dragon's slaughtering devil blade started shimmering in azure light. Fused, but with my current strength, I still can't unleash the true might of the dragon soul and the blade, Xianxia said with some regret, before the azure dragon's slaughtering devil blade turned into an azure light and flashed into his body before appearing in his hands. The azure dragon's slaughtering devil blade slowly turned smaller until it resembled a dagger, a very small dagger. Now it could truly be said that Xianxia could control the azure dragon's slaughtering devil blade. When this blade was being refined, a section was left for the weapon's soul. That's why it can so perfectly fuse with the dragon soul. It seems I better research more regarding a weapon's soul. Even though it can make the weapon and its user fuse together, it is only possible with the support of a ton of spirit patterns. Lu Menjur said in a low voice, as thoughts surfaced and started racing in her mind. Xianxia looked at the Lu Menjur's pondering appearance and was enthralled. He could not help but reach out and stroke her beautiful face, which made her lightly spit in response. Thanks a lot, Sister Menjur, for helping me buy such an expensive thing. I'll definitely pay you back. Xianxia slightly smiled and said. At this moment, the two of them were very close to one another. As Xianxia deeply inhaled the sweet fragrance wafting off of Lu Menjur's body. Meanwhile, Lu Menjur could feel a heat emanating from Xianxia. Both of them could not help but stare into each other's eyes. Slowly, they unconsciously moved in closer before both of their lips came in contact and sealed each other's lips. Before long, their tongues were intertwined, embracing the other tightly as they began passionately kissing. After their kiss, both of them remained closely embraced, enjoying the wonderful lingering sensation. Lu Menjur's face was slightly flushed. Last time she said this would never happen again. Yet she was here. Thinking of this point, she lightly pinched Xianxia's arm. Remember to pay me back. Although I don't really care about it, I do care about your future. In the future you might not need to rely on me. You are going to become even more stronger, Lu Menjur gently said as she lied in Xianxia's embrace. And, even though Xianxia's response seemed light-hearted, he knew it was very heavy. Lu Menjur was not asking him to repay, but rather take responsibility. Besides the 9 elemental flower and the resurrection grass, there were 2 other main ingredients for the resurrection dan, which were the white jade lotus seed and the hell spirit grass, but Lu Menjur did not ask for those 2 things. Obviously, she was thinking for his sake. Sister Menjur, give me the 9 elemental flower. Xianxia released Lu Menjur from his embrace, and gently said while stroking her cheek, gently. Lu Menjur nodded her head. She didn't ask the reason, and simply handed over the 9 elemental flower to Xianxia. Don't lose. Xianxia kissed her cheek, and said with a laugh, I'm going to look for Dean, and make him angry. Lu Menjur dispelled the barrier, allowing Xianxia to leave. Thinking of what just happened a moment ago, her complexion turned incomparably complex, before she let out a helpless sigh. Xianxia was now in possession of all the main herbs of the resurrection dan, Even though it was only one set, it was enough. With just one set, he could grow and multiply it into a vast amount. It was just that he currently didn't have the strength to refine it. That was a high-grade Earth-level Dan. Xianxia was still far off from being able to refine that level of Dan. Gu Dongchen and Wu Kaming were living in a small, yet a very beautiful residence. This residence didn't have any formation, so Xianxia directly leapt over the wall. Just as he stepped inside, a handsome and suave mane appeared in front of him. It was Gu Dongchen. Young martial uncle, what are you sneaking about for? Gu Dongchen was just a step away from slapping the intruder, before noticing who it was. At this point Wu Kaming also arrived, while Xianxia's complexion turned completely serious. I have a very important matter to tell you, Xianxia said with very solemn look. Gu Dongchen quickly entered a room with Xianxia. Although his young martial uncle was far worse than him in strength, he definitely had a lot of means. Moreover, he was a very ruthless person, which was why Gu Dongchen and Wu Kaming both held deep admiration towards him. Young martial uncle, quickly speak, Wu Kaming urged. Suddenly, a bright smile appeared on Xianxia's face. He sipped a bit of tea before stating, eldest martial nephew, the 10-building foundation dawn you bought in the auction was refined by your martial uncle. You're truly generous, buying just 10 dawn for 20 million. From what I remember, you paid me the same amount for 40 dawn last time. That's all. As expected. After hearing Xianxia's words, Gu Dongchen's face immediately turned green. Although he was a little angry in his heart, he knew the future would be tragic. He had believed Xianxia had not gone to the auction. But now that he knew the price of a building foundation dan, a higher price needed to be paid later if he still wanted to buy them from him. Elder martial nephew, you're truly formidable. During the bidding battle, even though you were being suppressed by Lu Menger and Lian Yingxiao, you still had a lot of wealth. You even managed to fight with them until the very end. Xianxia came next to Gu Dongchen and patted his shoulder. Gu Dongchen's face was deathly pale. Xianxia now knew he was a plutocrat. The next time Xianxia would sell things to Gu Dongchen, he would definitely swindle his money back and then some. Wu Kaming was laughing on the side. Gu Dongchen had always been feigning poverty. It was precisely to make Xianxia sell the dawn cheaply to him. However, during the auction, he had basically revealed his hidden abundant fortune. While looking at Xianxia's proud appearance, Gu Dongchen secretly complained in his heart. Last time, Xianxia had sold him 40 building foundation dawn. That was the first time Gu Dongchen had ever bought so many at once. Before, he was only able to buy one or a few dawn. That was why he was sure Xianxia was in possession of many ingredients for refining the building foundation dawn. As the dean of the extreme martial sect, the development of the extreme martial sect was his most important responsibility. And, in order to quickly elevate the strength of his sect's disciples, dawn were a necessity. Even though there were a lot of extreme martial sect disciples, the true martial realm martial artists were extremely scarce. If he had a large number of building foundation dawn in a short span of time, it would become possible for the 10th level mortal martial realm martial artists with potential to advance into the true martial realm. Young martial uncle, do you still have building foundation dawn? Gu Dongchen asked. I don't have any more. Wait for me to look for you again. Xianxia had them without a doubt, but there were not many in his hands. Moreover, if he sold them to Gu Dongchen now, he would not get a higher price. Lian Yingxiao and his son are coming. He is definitely going to show off. Wu Kaming suddenly spoke. At this time, Xianxia also felt Lian Yingxiao's aura coming over. Before, Xianxia was sure Lian Mingdong and Ling Yingxiao had some relation. They were most likely father and son. But now that he heard Ling Yingxiao was coming with his son, he could not help but be a little surprised. Who is his son? Is he formidable? Xianxia asked. An alchemist at the 5th level of the true martial realm, he is not low-key like his father. On the contrary, he is an arrogant guy born from Lian Yingxiao's 7th wife 100 years ago. Among the numerous sons and daughters of Lian Yingxiao, he can be considered to have excellent qualifications. Gu Dongchen immediately replied. Xianxia was surprised. How many women does Lian Yingxiao have in the end? He's actually able to walk with his son, yet you two are actually still bachelors. Too useless. Even your martial uncle have a wife. It seemed that this gentle and courteous Lien Yingxiao actually have so many women. Chen Xiang now suspected that Lien Mingdong might not have received much attention in the Lotus Island. But Lien Mingdong's character was very similar to Liang Yingxiao. It was quite clear that Lien Mingdong had inherited more of his father's blood. Lien Yingxiao have tens of women, however. Now only 9 are left. The others have not died. But they actually had illicit affairs with someone else and ran away with them. Gu Dongqin laughingly said, "Young martial uncle, you can't look down upon me. My woman is just no longer in the Qinwu mainland, that's all. She's in another mainland at the moment, and it might take some time for her to come. The other mainlands were all far away beyond the sea." Chen Xiang also wanted to have an opportunity to travel to those places. He looked at Wu Kaming, then asked while laughing, "Little Baldy, what about you?" Wu Kaming pursed his lips and said, "I'm only an old man. Who is going to look at me?" Lien Yingxiao arrived with a handsome and proud man, who had sword-like eyebrows and star-like bright eyes. This man was precisely the favorite son of Lien Yingxiao, named Lien Chongyun. Lien Yingxiao has really treasured his son enough to point where he didn't send him to the southern wasteland. Chen Xiang gave a dismissive glance at Lien Chongyun, then respectfully saluted towards Lien Yingxiao. "Chongyun, this is the top youngest expert of the extreme martial sect, as well as the top youngest alchemist, Chen Xiang. You must have heard of his name. Come and greet him." Lien Yingxiao smiled and said. Chen Xiang's reputation was very great. In the entire Qinwu mainland, most of the martial artists had heard of him, and he was truly worthy of the title, the teenage genius. Lien Chongyun was secretly envious of Chen Xiang though. He was known for relying on his father, while Chen Xiang relied on no one. Not only did Chen Xiang had an astounding reputation, he had also obtained the favor of Xianxia from the divine weapon Heavenly Empire, becoming husband and wife. This was what made Lien Chongyun most envious. Lien Chongyun had inherited his father's romantic character. Once he had paid a visit to the divine weapon Heavenly Empire with Lien Yingxiao, and at that time he had seen Xianxia. He very much desired to have such a fairy-like girl, but he didn't expect that she was already engaged to Chen Xiang. Although it was the first time Lien Chongyun met Chen Xiang, he very much hated Chen Xiang. However, in order to not lose his father's face, he politely greeted, "Chen Xiang, I heard you like to gamble. Whether it's fighting or alchemy, are you willing to gamble with me? We can decide who is going to win and lose in the alchemy tournament." Lien Chongyun asked. Although a smile was hanging upon his face, his tone was full of provocation. Chen Xiang shook his head, which in turn caused Lien Chongyun's complexion to change. "Could it be that you're looking down on me? Since it was just a battle of words between youths." Gu Dongqin and the others did not meddle in the slightest. They were just at the side, watching the good show that was unfolding. When Lien Yingxiao heard Chen Xiang's refusal, he felt very uncomfortable in his heart. Last time he had given Chen Xiang a white jade lotus seed, and now he was actually not giving him face. "Are you afraid I can't afford to bet with you? How about I bet a white jade lotus seed with you?" Lien Chongyun dismissively said with a look of pride, as though possessing the white jade lotus seed was very amazing. Lien Yingxiao had not spoken of the matters that had occurred in the southern wasteland, and he had even ordered others that they could not speak of it. That was why Lien Chongyun wasn't aware of anything. "Brat, isn't it better to give a little bit of face? That is the white jade lotus seed we're talking about. If you can't afford to follow up, I and junior brother can help you." Gu Dongqin also didn't know what was wrong with Chen Xiang. Chen Xiang had actually refused to take such a big gamble. Gu Dongqin also didn't want Lien Yingxiao to hate Chen Xiang. Chen Xiang sighed in his heart and kindly asked, "Brother Lien, what level of alchemy tournament are you going to participate?" "Naturally the middle rank. For my age, participating in the middle rank tournament is already good. You are also an outstanding young alchemist. How about you and me compete?" Lien Chongyun replied. He very much wanted to defeat Chen Xiang, and it was clearly implied from his tone. Chen Xiang wryly smiled and said, "I'm afraid I will have to disappoint Brother Lien. It's not that I do not want to compete with Brother Lien in the alchemy tournament. It's just that little brother is going to be participating in the high-rank tournament." "High-rank tournament?" Gu Dongqin, Wu Kaming and Lian Yingxiao, all three of them, were suddenly surprised. Only a 5th or 6th level alchemist could participate in the high-rank tournament. In other words, was Xianxia already a 5th level alchemist? Impossible! Xianxia, do not refuse my challenge with this kind of reason. At the very least, a 5th level alchemist must be able to refine 3 kinds of low-grade profound level dawn. Just to be successful in one kind, countless number of herbs are needed for practice. If it's for 3 kinds of dawn, it will be even more difficult. How can you be able to refine 3 kinds of low-grade profound level dawn at 20 or so years of age? My teacher is considered to be a genius, yet it had taken him 200 years to become a 5th level alchemist. Lian Chongyun furiously shouted. Oh! Xianxia exclaimed. Then he took out a piece of jade card. On the jade card there were 5 light golden lines, and this was precisely the proof of being a low 5th level alchemist. On it, Xianxia's name was also written, and on its back, some words had been carved in blood. They were the signatures of the examining alchemists. Gu Dongchen was the first one to grab it to look. Seeing the 4 signatures, he frowned while saying, unexpectedly, you were personally examined by Hua Xiangyue. As far as I know, Hua Xiangyue is an 8th level alchemist, and the other 3 alchemists are also rather famous. All of them had once helped me refine dawn. This jade card should not be fake. Lian Yingxiao was stunned. Lian Chongyun's face had also turned red, just a moment ago. He claimed Xianxia was lying to him. Yet Xianxia had taken out the most indisputable proof. At this moment, Lian Chongyun couldn't wait to drill a hole on the ground and bury his head in shame. At the same time, his hatred for Xianxia had increased even more. Lian Yingxiao took the jade card from Gu Dongchen's hand. From one glance, he knew that it was true. Even he didn't expect that Xianxia actually had such a monstrous talent. Xianxia was not even 30 years old, yet he was already a 5th level alchemist.